Runaway slave returns at midnight, but its master's wife waiting in the barn, Tennessee, 1833. Rain had not yet begun to fall, but the whole night felt swollen with it, heavy, breathless, waiting to burst. The clouds hung so low over the Carter plantation that the tops of the pines seemed to scrape against them. The wind tasted like metal, like something torn loose far away and blown here to warn the living. Elias knew storms better than most men. He had worked in fields long enough to read the sky the way others read scripture. And tonight, as he crept back through the shadowed tree line, every instinct told him he was returning to danger. He had run, not far, not to freedom, not truly, just beyond the ridge to find the packet he'd hidden months ago, a scrap of paper, a charcoal stub, and the battered remnants of a primer he'd stolen years back when he learned no one checked the old smokehouse shelves anymore. He needed them like others needed breath. Words steadied him, reminded him he was still a man beneath the laws that said otherwise. But he had risked too much retrieving them. Too long away. Too close to curfew. Too close to the overseer's rounds. His bare feet swallowed the mud as he reached the Carter barn. The lantern usually left burning by the outer door was gone, a bad sign. Either someone had forgotten to light it, or someone had taken it inside. Wind rattled the barn boards in slow, warning breaths. Elias touched the hidden packet in his waistband, listening. No whip cracks, no boots, no voices. He opened the door a crack. A lantern glowed inside, not hanging high, but low on the ground, beside a pair of small hands clasped in worry. Hands belonging to the mistress of the plantation, Mrs. Liliana Carter. She was kneeling on the dirt, skirts pooled around her like spilled moonlight, staring at the door with eyes too wide for midnight. Her shawl had slipped from her shoulders. Her hair, usually pinned tightly, fell loose enough to hint she had been pacing or pulling at it. Elias froze halfway inside. Lightning flashed behind him, outlining his shape like a silhouette made for judgment. She rose slowly. "Close the door," she whispered. "Please!" That word, please, struck him harder than any order. Mistresses did not plead with the enslaved. Not ever. Not unless something had gone terribly wrong. Elias shut the door. The barn filled again with the pulse of the lantern, warm and trembling. She stepped closer, voice shaking. "I thought you weren't coming back." He stared at her, unsure whether this was accusation or relief. "I had work to finish, ma'am," he said carefully, the safest truth he could offer. But she shook her head. "I mean you didn't return before curfew. The overseer has been restless. My husband is due back from Nashville tomorrow. If they find you missing tonight..." Thunder cracked overhead, drowning her words. Dust trickled from the rafters. Liliana flinched. Elias had never seen her like this, not the distant, porcelain woman drifting through the big house corridors, not the lady who spoke softly but lived behind walls thicker than stone. This was a frightened woman, a lonely woman, a woman hiding in a barn at midnight because something had driven her there. He kept his posture low, cautious, arms at his sides. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "why are you waiting out here?" "For me?" Her breath hitched. "Because you're the only one who listens." That made him step back. Dangerous words. Too dangerous. Not romantic, but dangerous in other ways. Alliances, secrets, suspicion from others who would twist anything into justification for punishment. He lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't be here with me, ma'am. Not alone. Not at this hour." "I know." Her voice cracked. "God forgive me, I know. But I had no one else to ask." "Elias, something is happening, and you're the only soul on this land who might understand." Rain began tapping the roof, soft at first, then harder, until the entire barn shuddered with it. Her hands shook as she drew something from beneath her shawl. A letter, sealed, torn at the edge. She held it like a confession. He recognized the handwriting instantly, Master Carter's heavy, slanted script. "I read it," she whispered, shame burying her tone. "I shouldn't have, but I did. And now I don't know what to do." She extended it toward him. "I need you to read it too." Elias's heart lurched. Liliana Carter did not know he could read. No one did. He forced his voice steady. "Ma'am, I can't. I don't read letters." But she stepped closer, eyes searching his face in a way that made it clear she had noticed things over the months. The way he glanced at signs others ignored. The way he paused near bookshelves as though listening. The way his gaze moved when words were in the room. "Elias," she whispered, rain roaring above them. "I know." He stiffened. "I know you can read." Lightning flashed. Thunder followed, the storm swelling into something furious and alive. The barn door shuddered against the wind. Elias felt the world tilt. This secret, the one that could get him whipped, chained, sold, killed, was now in the hands of the mistress, who barely spoke to anyone unless necessary. Her voice dropped to a near plea. "I don't want to hurt you. I would never. But I need your help. My husband. He. He's planning something. Something terrible." She pushed the letter toward him again. Another burst of thunder rolled across the sky, and somewhere beyond the barn, a dog barked, sharp, alert. Time was running thin. Elias took the letter. Not because he trusted her. He couldn't. Not because he wanted to help her. It was too dangerous. But because whatever drove her to a midnight barn, trembling, alone, could be something sharp enough to cut every man and woman on the Carter land. He opened the letter. The ink was smudged, but the words were clear. As he read them, his breath left him in a slow, horrified exhale. He looked up. Liliana's face was pale as ghostlight. "What does it say?" she whispered. Thunder crashed violently, so loud it shook the lantern flame. Elias lowered the letter. "It says," he murmured, voice tight with dread, "your husband's planning to sell half the plantation's folks, including me." Her hand flew to her mouth. The lantern flickered out, and the barn fell into darkness. Same cinematic tone, same danger, same slow burn, emotional tension. No romance, only forbidden trust, fear, and the storm closing in. The darkness inside the barn did not fall gently. It dropped like a curtain whipped down by an unseen hand. Rain drummed the roof, wind bullied the walls, and the faintest scent of smoke drifted from the lantern's extinguished wick. Elias stayed perfectly still. He had been taught since childhood that the worst thing a man in chains could do was move too quickly when a white woman was near. Darkness made that rule even more dangerous. One startled gasp from her, and the wrong person overhearing it could end his life before dawn. So he kept his voice low, steady, slow. "Ma'am, don't move. Let me find the lantern." But she wasn't listening. Her breath came quick and shallow, the way a trapped bird beats against its own ribs. "They can't sell you," she whispered, voice breaking over each word. "He promised me," he said. "He said he wouldn't touch the house servants again." Elias crouched carefully, fingers brushing hay and dirt until he found the lantern. A flint was on the wall shelf. He reached for it with practiced movements that made almost no sound. Her breath quivered somewhere behind him. "He'll sell whoever profits him most," Elias murmured softly. "Ain't no promises in the ledger books, ma'am." The flint sparked. A glow returned, faint, then brighter, then warm enough to paint shadows across her face. She was crying. Not loud, not dramatically. Quiet tears, the kind that fall when someone has been holding themselves together too long. Elias looked away. A crying white woman was a sight no enslaved man should ever be seen looking at too closely. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, ashamed and angry at herself. "I didn't know," she whispered. I thought I understood life here. I thought if I was kind, if I kept the household gentle then." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know how easily he could destroy people." Elias said nothing. There was truth that could be spoken, and truth that could only be swallowed. She looked at him suddenly, eyes burning with something fierce, not romance, not longing, but a desperate, terrified determination. "Elias, you must run. Tonight." Lightning flared white against the barn boards. Elias felt the storm inside that single sentence. Leaving. Tonight. Running. Tonight. Not a planned escape, not a map, not a chance to gather supplies. Just raw fear and urgency tangled into a plan as reckless as a man stepping into floodwaters. "I can't run," he said evenly. "Not yet." "Yes, you can." She stepped closer. "You must." "I'll hide your absence. I'll tell Nathaniel." "You'll tell him nothing." Elias cut in quietly. She blinked at the firmness in his tone. He straightened slowly, keeping his movements measured. "If I run in this storm, they'll find my tracks. If I run without a plan, I'll get caught before sunrise. And if I get caught, ma'am." He didn't have to finish. The look in her eyes told him she understood. She clasped her hands tightly. "Then we plan. We plan together." A dangerous sentence. More dangerous than the storm, the darkness, the letter. Dangerous because it meant she had chosen a side, and not her husband's. Elias shook his head. "Ma'am, with respect, you don't know what you're asking. If anyone sees us talking like this, it'll cost me my life. And ruin yours." She stepped closer still, whispering urgently. "You read that letter. If he sells you, I may never see you again." Her voice trembled with something deeper, a fear not just for him, but for herself. "I can't let that happen. Not after." She trailed off, biting her lip. "Not after everything." He frowned. "Everything what?" Her eyes darted toward the door, as if the storm itself might be listening. "Not here. Not tonight. Come to the cellar tomorrow evening. At dusk. The servants will be busy preparing supper. The overseer avoids the lower rooms if he can help it. He will be safe, safer than here." "No place is safe," Elias murmured. "Then safer for me," she corrected quietly. "And for you, if you're careful." Thunder shook the barn again. The horses stamped nervously in their stalls. She swallowed hard. "I will tell you what's in the rest of the letters." Elias's breath stopped. "There's more." She nodded. "3 more. Hidden in my writing desk. My husband plans to leave again in 2 days. When he does, we'll have more time to read them." He stared at her, the lantern flickering between them. "You're risking everything," he whispered. Her voice was almost too soft to hear over the storm. "So are you." The wind slammed the barn door suddenly, as if warning them their time had run out. Liliana flinched. "Someone might come looking. We must leave separately. You go out the back. I'll slip into the house from the east path." She gathered her shawl around her shoulders, trembling. "Elias," she added, turning back at the door, "I'm sorry I kept silent this long. I'm sorry I didn't know what I didn't know. But I see it now. Everything this place truly is." Her eyes met his, wide and honest in the lantern's glow. "I won't let him sell you." The door cracked open, letting in rain and a gust of cold wind. She disappeared into the darkness with her shawl fluttering behind her. Elias watched the door close softly, the storm swallowing her whole. He didn't move for a long time. Not until the lantern flame steadied and the horses quieted. Then he tucked the damning letter into his waistband, exhaled through the weight pressing against his ribs, and slipped out the back into the night, unseen, untracked, but heavy with a truth that now bound him to the mistress in a way more dangerous than any chain. She knew his secret, and he now knew hers. Far across the yard, a shape moved near the big house porch. The overseer, lantern in hand, looking, searching. Elias froze in the shadows, heart pounding. If the overseer found him out here after hours. The overseer turned his lantern slowly, scanning the rain. Elias stayed pressed against the wall of the shed, breath shallow, mud running under his feet like cold blood. Then the overseer's lantern lifted, pointed almost directly toward him. Elias tightened his jaw. One more step, one more inch, and this night would turn from fear to funeral. The lantern paused. The overseer squinted through the rain. Thunder cracked overhead. The lantern shifted away. The overseer spat into the mud, muttered, and walked off toward the quarters. Elias did not move until the man's footsteps faded into the storm. Then, slowly, silently, he slipped back toward the dark, wet door of the slave cabins, the stolen letter folded like a blade hidden against his skin. Tomorrow at dusk. The cellar. The mistress waiting. Secrets waiting. Plans forming. And danger closing in from every side. The next day dawned gray and swollen with humidity, as if the storm had not ended but merely drawn breath. The sky brooded over the Carter plantation, waiting for another chance to break open. Elias rose before first light, as he always did, though sleep had barely touched him. Every sound outside the cabin had sharpened during the night, every distant bootstep, every rustle of leaves, every dog bark. He kept hearing the overseer's lantern swinging in the dark like a signal fire meant for him alone. But morning routines did not stop for fear. He stepped outside with the other men, kept his head low during roll call, and slipped the folded letter deeper into his trouser so it would not show at the waistband. If anyone saw it, he forced the thought away. By sunrise, the overseer, Wade Harker, was already riding through the fields, shouting his usual curses, stirring dust with his boots and violence with his eyes. He looked at Elias longer than usual. Too long. Elias kept his face carved from stone. Harker spit into the dirt. Heard you wasn't in your cabin last night. Elias felt the blood chill in his veins. Went to check the horse trough. He lied evenly. Storm loosened the boards. Harker's eyes narrowed. That's so. Yes, sir. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, Harker laughed. A dry, humorless bark. If you're fool enough to work extra in that storm, then I got nothing to worry about. He rode off, still chuckling. Elias exhaled silently. But the overseer looking for him meant someone had noticed his absence. Too close. Far too close. By midday, the air was so thick with heat that every breath felt like soup. Sweat ran down the backs of the field hands. Shirts stuck to skin. Insects buzzed like a chorus of needles. From the porch of the big house, Liliana Carter watched them with unreadable eyes. She wore a pale dress that should have been suited for a social call or an afternoon visit, but her posture betrayed a woman stretched thin. Her fingers twisted the fabric at her sides. Every few minutes she glanced toward the forest, then toward the barns, then toward Elias. Not directly at him, never long enough to draw attention. Just a flicker. A question. Are you still safe? A warning. Tonight. The cellar. Elias never looked back, but he felt her attention like heat on the nape of his neck. As the sun sagged low and the day thinned into dusk, he finished his chores with mechanical precision. Every lash of the broom, every bucket lifted, every horse rubbed down was part of a quiet march toward the most dangerous meeting of his life. When the dinner bell rang and servants hurried into the kitchen, the overseer's attention shifted to supervising the evening meal. Harker despised cellar work, said it smelled like mildew and dead rats. That was why she had chosen it. Elias slipped around the back of the big house, down the slope where the earth dipped cool and dark at twilight's edge. Frogs croaked by the cistern. Fireflies pulsed between the trees like wandering embers. The cellar door sat half buried in the hill, wooden and worn, slightly ajar. A single candle flickered inside. He stepped down into the earthy chill. The door closed behind him. Liliana stood near the far shelves, her breathing shallow but steadier than the night before. The candle cast soft, wavering light across her face. You came, she whispered. I said I would. She nodded, relieved. We haven't much time. Nathaniel is in his study. He'll be there until supper. He won't come down here. Elias kept a safe distance, arms loose at his sides. He could smell damp wood, soil, old wine casks, the faint sweetness of stored apples. She moved to a small table against the wall. I brought the rest of the letters. 3 envelopes lay there, their seals already broken. Elias's pulse quickened. She pushed them toward him, hands trembling despite her attempts to steady them. I can't read all the words clearly. Some are smudged, and even when I understand them, I don't understand the business language, the way he hides the truth in numbers. Elias picked up the first letter. Holding her husband's handwriting again felt like gripping a weapon. He read silently. After a moment, his jaw tightened. What does it say? she asked, voice breaking. He lifted his eyes to her. It says Master Carter's been buying up property east of here. He's planning to move operations toward the river. Needs money fast. Says half the hands here can be liquidated to pay for it. Her face crumpled. Another letter. Elias unfolded it. Rain began pattering on the cellar door above them, soft at first. He read, and felt something cold slide through him. She stepped nearer, fear rising. Elias, what is it? He hesitated, then said the words that would change everything a second time. He's arranging a shipment for next week. 4 wagons. East Road. No return trip. She went pale. Dear God. The names ain't written, Elias continued, but there's enough space in the list for near 30 folks. Liliana sank against the table, gripping its edge. That's nearly half the community, she whispered. Families, children. Her voice broke. Lightning flashed against the tiny cellar window. Elias held the letter tighter. He means to sell them south, he murmured. Deep south. Mississippi or Louisiana. No chance they'd come back. A soft, broken cry escaped her throat. She covered her face, shoulders trembling. Elias looked away again, giving her the privacy that society never had. Finally, she lowered her hands. Her face was streaked with tears, but her gaze was steady, fiercer than he'd ever seen it. We need a plan, she said, voice raw, to stop him, to protect everyone. We? He echoed. She stepped closer. I can't let him destroy the lives of people who've served on this land longer than he's owned it. I can't, won't stand by. Her conviction shocked him, not because he doubted her heart, but because the risk for her was nearly as great as for him. He shook his head slowly. You don't know what you're putting yourself into. I do. She lifted her chin. For the first time in my life, I do. The storm outside grew louder. The candle shook in its flame. She looked at him with the fierce, trembling certainty of someone who has already crossed the point of no return. There must be a way to warn them, she whispered. A way to protect you. To protect everyone. Elias exhaled. I got ideas, he said quietly, but none of them safe. Tell me anyway. He studied her, this woman who, a few days ago, was just a silent figure passing through hallways, now ready to stand against the master of the house. He lowered his voice. If folks know what's coming, they might run before the wagons get here. Her eyes widened. All of them? Whoever's willing. Whoever's brave enough. But running takes more than courage. Takes food. Takes water. Takes routes that ain't guarded. Takes someone inside the house keeping an eye on movements. She understood instantly. You mean me? Yes, ma'am. The cellar suddenly felt colder. She pressed a hand to her chest. If they catch me helping, they will hang you, Elias said plainly. And worse for me. Silence flooded the space between them. But then she whispered, with a steadiness that chilled him, then we must be very careful. The candle guttered. A creak sounded at the top of the cellar stairs. Both froze. Elias's heart slammed against his ribs. Bootsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming down the stairs. Liliana's eyes widened in terror. Hide, she mouthed. Elias moved silently behind the stacked barrels, slipping into the narrow shadowed space as the footsteps grew louder. Halfway down the stairs, a lantern glow spilled into the cellar. A voice followed. Deep, gruff, suspicious. Liliana, you down here? Her husband, Master Nathaniel Carter, the man whose name was on the letters. The man planning to sell half the plantation. Elias pressed himself against the barrels, silent as death. Liliana swallowed, stepped forward, and forced her voice steady. Yes, Nathaniel. I came for a bottle of wine. For supper. The stairs creaked again as he descended fully into the cellar. Rain hammered the door above. Nathaniel lifted his lantern, scanning the room. Strange, he muttered. I could have sworn I heard voices. Liliana's breath caught, but she kept her tone smooth. Just me. Nathaniel took another step, lantern lifting higher, toward the barrels, toward Elias. Funny thing, he said, the servants say Harker found footprints near the barn last night. Footprints he didn't recognize. Liliana stiffened. Oh, she said lightly. Animals, perhaps. Nathaniel smirked. No, not animals. His lantern turned, light sliding across barrels, inches from Elias's face. He held his breath. Nathaniel stared at the shadows, stared hard. Then, he turned away. Bah! Nothing down here worth fussing over. He kissed his wife's cheek briefly. She didn't move. Come along, he said. Supper is nearly ready. She forced a breath. Yes, of course. He started up the stairs. Liliana hesitated only a moment, then followed him upward. The door closed. Her footsteps faded. Only then did Elias let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He stepped out from behind the barrels. The candle flickered violently, guttering with the draft from the stairs. He picked up the 3 letters, folded them tight, and tucked them into his waistband beside the first. Above him, the storm raged. Below, in the cellar, a new storm began forming, one made of plans, secrets, and a desperate pact between 2 people bound by danger. There was no turning back now. The next morning broke heavy with August heat, a humidity so thick it seemed to press the breath back into a man's chest. The plantation stirred early, tools clanked, mules brayed, and the overseer's voice cracked across the fields like a whip before any whip had struck. But beneath all this, beneath the usual grind of dawn labor, an uneasy tension threaded through the air, as though the land itself sensed what had transpired in the dark. Samuel kept his head down while chopping through rows of corn, but every muscle in his arms trembled, not from work, but from the memory of the night before. Mrs. Clara's voice still lingered inside him. You saved my life once. Now let me save yours. Terrifying words. Dangerous words. Words that could get both of them killed. He pushed the hoe deeper into the soil until sweat soaked through his shirt. Staying busy was safer than thinking. But thoughts came anyway, pushing in like stubborn weeds. Why had she risked waiting in that barn for him? Why had she asked him to trust her? And why, God help him, had part of him wanted to? Across the field, the overseer, Harlan Tate, sat atop his horse like a vulture waiting for weakness. His eyes, narrowed beneath the wide brim of his hat, scanned the laborers with an unsettling hunger. Samuel stiffened whenever those eyes turned toward him. Tate had a talent for sensing secrets, and Samuel was carrying a large one. Every time he glanced toward the main house, he felt heat rise in his chest. Through the shimmering morning haze, the second-floor balcony stood open. A pale figure stepped onto it. Mrs. Clara. Her posture was stiff, as though she too was forcing herself through a normal routine while carrying something heavy. She didn't look toward the fields. She didn't need to. Samuel kept chopping. By late afternoon, the heat was unbearable. Tate dismounted to inspect the progress and barked at anyone who slowed. When he reached Samuel, he paused. Boy, he said, scanning the row behind him, you're working fast today. Samuel kept his gaze to the ground. Yes, sir. Faster than usual, Tate added, suspicious now. Samuel's grip tightened on the hoe. Just trying to keep pace. Tate leaned closer. You look like a man hiding something. Samuel's heart slammed painfully against his ribs. No, sir, he said firmly, keeping his face blank, controlled. Tate studied him for a long moment. Then, with a grunt, he turned away. But Samuel knew. Tate wasn't finished. Men like Tate never were. That evening, after the sun dipped behind the tree line and the sky turned the color of bruised peaches, the plantation finally slowed. Laborers returned to the quarters, dragging fatigue behind them. Some cooked, some prayed, some just collapsed. Samuel washed his face at the pump and tried to quiet the storm of thoughts in his mind. He couldn't go to the barn. Surely Mrs. Clara wouldn't expect him again so soon. And even if she did, Tate's suspicion meant danger was closing in. Still, as the cicadas rose in their nightly chorus, Samuel felt a pull, like the barn was calling his name. He tried to resist it. Failed! Inside his cabin, His friend Elijah looked up. "You heading somewhere?" Samuel paused. Elijah was sharp, always had been. "Just need some air," Samuel muttered. Elijah stared for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Be careful. Overseer's prowling tonight." Samuel swallowed. "I know." The barn sat dark and quiet at the edge of the property, its silhouette softened by moonlight. Samuel approached hesitantly, checking over his shoulder every few steps. The door creaked softly as he slipped inside. "MRS. Clara?" No response. He exhaled, both relieved and disappointed. But then a soft rustle came from behind the stack of crates. She stepped forward, lantern in hand. "I hoped you'd come," she whispered. Samuel stared at her. "Ma'am, it ain't safe." "I know," she said, "but I need to speak with you." He hesitated before answering. "What about?" Clara set the lantern on a beam. Its warm glow pulled shadows upward, softening her features but sharpening the fear in her eyes. "My husband," she said quietly. "He's leaving tomorrow for Nashville." Samuel's breath caught. How long he gone for? 2 nights, maybe 3. That was significant, terribly significant. "He's traveling to negotiate the purchase of more," she hesitated, swallowing hard. "More people." Samuel clenched his jaw. He'd expected as much. Plantation owners accumulating wealth rarely cared whose lives they shattered to do it. Clara continued, "While he's gone, we have a chance." "Chance for what?" Samuel asked, though he already sensed the answer. She stepped closer. "I want you to show me the papers." Samuel froze. His entire world seemed to fold inward. "No," he said immediately. "That's too dangerous. If anyone finds out I'm Redden, that's my life." Clara's eyes softened. "I won't let anyone harm you." He shook his head. "Ma'am, you can't promise that." "Not here. Not with men like Tate watching every breath a man takes." She lowered her gaze. "I know the risks. But Samuel, I need to understand what your letters say. I need to understand the truth, your truth, this plantation's truth. Everything my husband keeps hidden." Samuel's pulse thudded in his ears. He had kept those papers hidden for years, letters passed down from his father, detailing family names, births, sales, and movements. A map of bondage. A map of survival. "These letters," he said, voice low, "if someone finds them, they won't just punish me. They'll break me for good." Clara stepped closer, her voice barely above breath. "And that is why I promise, on my life, I will not betray you." He stared at her, searching for deception. There was none. Only fear. Only determination. Only a woman cracking open under the weight of her own conscience. Finally, Samuel said slowly, "I'll bring one letter. Just one. And only while your husband gone." Clara exhaled shackily, relief washing across her face. "Thank you. But after that," he warned, "you and me, we gotta be more careful. Tate already watching me." Clara nodded. "Then we'll meet even more quietly. I will find ways to keep Tate occupied." Samuel frowned. "Don't put yourself in danger for me." Clara's voice softened. "You put yourself in danger for me when you saved me from drowning. That was the moment I learned courage isn't something one is born with. It's something you choose." Samuel didn't respond. He couldn't. The air around them felt too full of danger, of trust, of two lives crossing where the rules said they never should. Instead, he simply asked, "When should I bring the letter?" "Tomorrow night," she whispered. Their eyes held for a moment too long. Samuel turned away first. "I best go before someone sees us." "Yes," she said, voice strained. "Go." He slipped out into the night, checking for Tate lurking in the shadows. Seeing no one, he made his way back to the quarters, fear and determination twisting together in his gut. Behind him, Clara stood alone in the barn, the lantern flickering weakly in her trembling hand. She knew what she was asking from him. She knew the risk, and she knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow night, the truth would rise, quietly, dangerously, like a storm forming just beyond the horizon. And storms, once formed, do not vanish. They break. The next day moved slowly, heavy as a waiting storm. The enslaved workers sensed the tension, though they could not name it. The overseer, Tate, rode with an extra edge in his posture, his eyes sharper than usual, lingering too long on Samuel whenever he passed. Samuel worked with quiet precision, saying little, thinking much. Tonight, he would bring a letter to Clara. A single letter, one scrap of paper, worn soft with years, ink fading, edges fragile. Yet it held a world. Names, places, dates. The last trace of a father Samuel barely remembered, but still carried like a shadow inside him. He had hidden it under the floorboards beneath his mother's old pallet. No one knew, not even Elijah, because the less anyone knew, the safer they all were. As the sun scorched its way toward late afternoon, Tate drew near again, reining his horse to a stop beside Samuel. "You're quieter than usual," he said. Samuel didn't look up. "Just tired, sir. Tired men make mistakes." Tate leaned down, voice low. "You make one I don't like, and it'll be the last mistake you get to make." Samuel kept his breath steady. "Yes, sir." Tate's gaze lingered on him long enough that heat rose under Samuel's skin. Then he snapped the reins and rode off. That was the moment Samuel knew. Tonight was more dangerous than any night before. By dusk, the plantation master's carriage rattled down the long drive, headed toward Nashville. Clara stood on the porch, waving mechanically, her face calm, her frame rigid. When the horses disappeared over the hill, she let her hand fall to her side and exhaled the breath she'd been holding for hours. She was alone now. She could finally move. Inside the house, she drifted through the halls as though listening for footsteps that no longer existed. Whenever she passed the window facing the fields, she glanced out, searching for Samuel without letting herself admit it. But she saw nothing, only silhouettes of men walking back to their cabins and the heavy, settling dusk. Night took its time arriving. Crickets filled the air. Fireflies blinked like scattered sparks. Samuel waited in his cabin until the others had eaten, prayed, settled, or pretended to settle. Elijah sat sharpening a small knife. Without looking up, he said, "You going somewhere tonight?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Why you a-skin that? You been restless all day," Elijah murmured. "And Tate ain't stopped watching you." Samuel hesitated. He never kept things from Elijah lightly, but the truth was too dangerous to share. "Just getting air," Samuel finally said. Elijah nodded slowly, his eyes saying he didn't believe a word of it. "If you need help," he added softly, "you just say so." Samuel swallowed hard. "I know." He stepped into the night before he could say more. The letter was tucked inside his shirt, close to his chest. He moved carefully, sticking to shadows, avoiding any line of sight from Tate's cabin near the stables. The overseer wasn't outside, but that didn't mean he wasn't watching. When Samuel reached the barn, he paused, listening. Silence. He stepped inside. Clara was already there, lantern lit, standing by the wooden crates like the night before. But tonight she looked different, more resolved, less fragile. "You came," she whispered. Samuel nodded. "You sure about this?" "Yes," she said. "I need to know the truth. All of it." Samuel reached into his shirt and pulled out the folded, delicate letter. Clara inhaled sharply, her eyes widening with a reverence he hadn't expected. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand. He hesitated, then placed the letter in her palm. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear it. "What does it say?" she asked. "Read it," Samuel said, voice low. "I'll tell you the rest." Clara brought the lantern closer. Her lips moved silently as she pieced through the writing. Benjamin Carter, age 32, sold to Jennings Plantation, Mississippi. Son left behind. Samuel Carter, age 5. Her eyes lifted to his, horrified. This is your father." Samuel nodded once. "Sold before I was old enough to remember. Improper." Clara swallowed. "And your mother kept this?" "She hid it her whole life," Samuel said. "Told me to keep it safe. Told me to never trust a white hand reaching for it. Clara flinched, not at the words, but at the truth behind them. Do you know where he is now? That letter's all I got, Samuel said. Last word was Mississippi. Might be alive. Might not. Men like him. They don't last long if the work kills them. Clara's voice softened. I am so sorry. Samuel shook his head. Sorry don't change nothing. But knowing where I come from, it keeps me standing. Gives me reason to breathe. Clara carefully refolded the letter and handed it back to him, placing it in his palm with a tenderness that surprised him. You're not property, she whispered. No matter what this place says. Samuel looked at her sharply. You keep talking like that out loud, and it'll be both our graves. Clara lowered her gaze. I'm tired of living quiet, Samuel. You ain't the one will bleed first, he said softly. Their eyes held, the air thickening with the weight of truth neither had spoken before. Then Clara stepped back. There's more, isn't there? More letters? One more, Samuel admitted. But I can't bring it. Too risky. Clara frowned. Why? 'Cause Tate already sniffing around me, he said. If he finds anything, he'll make sure I don't stand again. Clara's face hardened. Then I'll handle Tate. Samuel's breath caught. Ma'am, no. You don't understand the kind of man he is. I understand perfectly, she said, voice cold. I see how he looks at the people on this plantation. I see how he talks to them. I see how he thinks of authority. Then you know he ain't scared of you. Clara's jaw tightened. He should be. Samuel stared at her. This woman, this fragile, lonely, quiet woman, was unraveling into something fierce, something dangerous. A lantern flame in a room full of dry hay. Before he could speak, the barn door creaked. Both froze. Lantern light flickered across the walls. Footsteps approached. Samuel's blood ran cold. Clara blew out the lantern in one swift breath, plunging them into darkness. Hide, she whispered urgently. Now! Samuel darted behind the crates, crouching low, clutching the precious letter to his chest. The door swung open fully. A figure stood in the entrance. Tate! Samuel felt the world narrow to a single point. Clara stepped forward into the faint moonlight. Mr. Tate, she said evenly. What are you doing here? Tate tipped his hat. Saw the barn lit up a moment ago. Thought I'd check. Clara's tone sharpened. The light was mine. You out here alone? Tate asked, voice like a blade. Yes, she lied smoothly. I sometimes need quiet. Something you seem to have trouble understanding. Tate smirked. S'pose the mistress of the house can wander where she pleases. That she can. Tate looked past her, scanning the shadows. Samuel barely breathed. You sure you ain't seen nobody out here? Tate asked. Clara stepped closer, her posture straight, her voice crisp. Are you questioning me? Tate swallowed. No, ma'am. Good, Clara said, because the next time I decide to take a lantern and walk, I won't tolerate being followed like a criminal. Tate's jaw twitched. Yes, ma'am. Then leave, she commanded. He hesitated, then turned and walked out, closing the door behind him. When his footsteps were finally gone, Clara exhaled shackily. Samuel rose slowly from hiding. You didn't have to lie for me, he whispered. Clara turned to him, eyes blazing. Yes, Samuel, I did. And in that moment, he understood something for the first time. Clara was no longer just trouble, no longer just lonely. She was crossing lines. She was becoming dangerous, for herself, for him, for everyone bound to that land. And there was no going back. The night after Tate nearly caught them in the barn settled over the plantation like a lid over boiling water. Heat, silence, and dread pressed down on everything. Nothing moved freely. Not wind, not breath. Samuel barely slept. Elijah kept a quiet vigil on the edge of his own pallet, watching his friend's restlessness. Neither spoke. Both understood too much. Samuel lay awake thinking of Clara's words, her tone when she had confronted Tate, the dangerous fire rising in her that could burn them all. He had wanted truth, but truth carried weight. And tonight, it pressed suffocatingly on his chest. He couldn't meet with her again. Not like this. Not with Tate suspicious. Not with something inside Clara snapping, bright as flint. If one of them broke, just one, it would be Samuel who paid with blood. He knew what he had to do. And it terrified him. Morning came with a gray, swollen sky. Clouds so heavy they looked ready to drop straight onto the earth. Clara stood at the dining room window, staring out at the fields. Her hands were clasped in front of her so tightly the knuckles whitened. Her husband would return tonight or tomorrow. She knew what that meant. This fragile window of freedom, of whispered truth, of clandestine nights, would slam shut again. She told herself that was why her heart pushed so painfully against her ribs. She told herself she was only afraid for Samuel, for what might happen if her husband or Tate discovered them speaking alone. But the truth was heavier. This house felt like a coffin, and Samuel, his unwilling courage, his steady voice, the way he held truths no one else dared to say, he had become a glimpse of air inside that coffin. Someone knocking at the makeshift coffin lid from outside. She could not lose that light. Not now. She turned abruptly from the window and headed toward the barn. Samuel was waiting for her. He stood in the shadow of the door, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders squared as though bracing himself for a blow. When she approached, he stepped forward, but his eyes didn't rise to meet hers right away. "Samuel," she exhaled, "you shouldn't be here in daylight. I'm leaving, Clara." Her breath died in her throat. He lifted his eyes then, and in them she saw sorrow, fear, resolve, a mixture so heavy it seemed to anchor the room. "Tonight," Samuel continued, "or before your husband gets back." "No." Her voice cracked like a snapped thread. "No, Samuel, you don't understand the danger." "Oh, I understand it just fine," he said. "Tate already looking for any excuse. And you," he swallowed hard, "you taking risks you don't even see." She stepped toward him. "You saved me in that barn, and I saved you. Does that mean nothing?" "It means everything," he whispered. "That's why I gotta go." Thunder muttered in the far distance, low and smoldering. Clara reached for the wall to steady herself. "You can't run alone. You'll be hunted. Dogs, patrols, river watchers. You won't even make it to Kentucky." "I'll take my chances," Samuel said quietly. "Better to die running free than living on my knees." "You are not on your knees," she snapped, too loud, too fast. He gave her a long, searching look. "You ain't the one gets whipped for speaking wrong." Her breath faltered. "No," she admitted, "I'm not." Silence draped itself between them like a heavy curtain. Then Clara took a trembling breath and lifted her chin. "You cannot go alone," she said again, but this time her voice was different, slow, deliberate, as though she had come to accept something long in her bones. "If you run tonight, I will help you." Samuel's heart lurched. "Clara, no. No. If they find out you helped, they'll." "I said what I said." Her eyes burned. "You showed me truth. I can't stay in this house pretending innocence anymore. If I do nothing, I'm complicit." The word felt like a stone dropping into deep water. Samuel stared at her, the weight of her resolve hitting him with terrifying clarity. Then he stepped closer, close enough she had to lift her face to meet his gaze. "Clara," he said softly, "you don't owe me that." She shook her head. "Maybe not. But I owe myself this much honesty." He saw it then. The same fire from the night before, only steadier now. No longer flaring wildly. Focused. Purposeful. Dangerous. Another rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Clara leaned in just slightly. "Meet me tonight. Midnight. By the sycamore at the riverbank. I'll bring papers. Food. Anything I can hide." Samuel exhaled shackily. "You sure?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." But the day had other plans. By evening, the plantation master's carriage returned early, wheels grinding on gravel, hounds barking, servants scattering. Clara was on the stairs when he walked in, mud on his boots, temper already simmering. "You didn't greet me at the gate," he barked. "You arrived early," she replied, careful to sound apologetic without seeming meek. He stared at her too long. "Something's different." She forced a hollow smile. "Just tired." A lie that fell onto the carpet like dead weight. He brushed past her. "I want Tate in my study within the hour. We have problems. Runaways from the Harper place. Need extra patrols." Clara's blood chilled. Runaways meant patrols. Patrols meant dogs. Dogs meant no one could reach the river without being torn apart. She slipped away while her husband stomped upstairs, heading toward her room with shaky hands. She needed to reach Samuel. Tonight. Before the patrol spread. Samuel was ready. A small bundle of food Elijah had insisted he take. A knife! A scrap of cloth wrapped around the old letter. That was all. Years of labor, pain, stolen childhood, boiled down to a few items in a sack slung over his shoulder. Elijah watched him, jaw tight. "You leavin'?" It wasn't a question. Samuel nodded. "Tonight." Elijah stood. "Then I'm coming with." "No." Samuel gripped his friend's arm. "If I don't make it, someone gotta stay alive to remember." Elijah's breath trembled. Then he pulled Samuel into a fierce embrace, their foreheads pressed together, grief and love passing between them without words. "Go," Elijah said hoarsely. So Samuel went. He kept low, weaving between shadows until he reached the edge of the woods near the river. Clara wasn't there, but something else was. Boot prints, fresh, heavy, and dragged grooves in the earth. A lantern. Dropped. Samuel's pulse thrashed. He followed the trail until he saw her. Clara, kneeling in the dirt, arms twisted behind her by Tate, who held her bound wrists in one cruel hand. Her husband stood beside them, face crimson with fury. Samuel froze. Clara saw him first. Her eyes begged him, "Run." Tate followed her gaze. His head snapped toward the trees. Samuel bolted. "There." The master roared. "GETHIM." The world exploded. Gunshots cracked. Dogs barked. Tate crashed through the brush after him. Branches whipped Samuel's face as he sprinted into the dark, lungs burning, legs screaming. He hit the riverbank, saw the swollen waters rushing wild and merciless. Behind him, shouts. Ahead, nothing but the current. Samuel looked once over his shoulder, and then he jumped. The river swallowed him whole, cold, violent, endless. He didn't know which bank he'd reach. Didn't know if the water would spit him out alive or carry him into another nightmare. But for the first time in his life, no chain pulled him back. Clara watched from the hill as torches moved along the river's edge, men shouting orders. She stood in silence, the rope burning around her wrists, tears drying on her cheeks. Her husband paced, livid. "If that boy survived, he won't get far." Clara said nothing. She only stared at the river, at the place where Samuel had vanished beneath the churning water. She prayed, not for safety, not for forgiveness, but for him to reach a shore no one owned. Dawn came gray and faint. Men rowed upriver, downriver, into the brush. They found nothing. No body, no sack, no sign but the broken reeds where he'd leapt. Clara returned to the house under close watch, her husband's hand gripped tight around her arm. He thought he was leading her. He didn't know she was already gone. In her heart, she walked beside Samuel, somewhere far beyond those fields, in a place her feet had never touched. Some nights, years later, travelers spoke of a quiet man living near the Ohio River, tall, strong, sharp-eyed. A man who carried a folded letter in his coat pocket and hired himself out as a carpenter. Some said he had no past. Others said he left it behind in a river that nearly took his life. But no one knew for sure. And in Tennessee, a young woman grew older in a house that never felt like home. She tended the window at dawn, long after her husband died and Tate moved on. She looked toward the river every morning. She never remarried. Somewhere inside her, she believed, hoped, that the man who jumped into the raging water had reached a shore with no overseer, no whip, no chain. A shore where he could breathe, where he could choose, where he could live, and though she would never see him again, she woke each day knowing one thing: freedom had claimed him, and that was enough.